Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. Let's see if we can. There we go. Happy Friday. How are you all? It's so good to be here again. I have been having so much fun on these lives. We've been talking about some of my very favorite topics, and I hope that you've been getting good value out of these conversations because in the 35-ish years that I have coached people, in the 22 years that I've taught human design, I watch people get entangled and stuck in these dynamics that hold them back from living the full expression, the truth of who they are. And it's hard to watch. It's hard to watch. I'm not going to lie. And part of why it's hard to watch is that, you know, you are each and every one of you exquisitely and perfectly designed. Literally, when I look at charts, and I've been looking at charts, every day of my life for 22 years, literally, I never see a chart where I'm like, oh, that's dumb. Oh, what were they thinking when they put that together? Every single chart is magical. And every single chart has kind of this magical story associated with it. And it's hard to witness people not stepping into the full expression of that story. So I get excited when I think about the possibility of any one of these nuggets dropping into your consciousness and maybe giving you a reframe or a new way to really think about how you could more clearly and more in a more aligned way express the truth of who you are. So I've been enjoying this a lot personally. I hope that you've gotten value out of the last couple of weeks. So here's what we've been talking about. In case you haven't joined us live yet, we've been looking at the resiliency key of courage. So what is a resiliency key? If I take the entire human design chart and I spun it up in a blender, what I would come out with are about 9 core archetypes that are really underneath all of the other archetypes in the chart. So type is an archetype, the lines of the profiles are an archetype, all the circuits have archetypes, all the centers are archetypes. They're just parts of the story, the human story. And for you to live out the full expression of your chart, the highest expression of the parts of your unique story as part of your role in the human story, if we get underneath all that, there are really 9 core archetypes or 9 core drivers that when they operate in the highest way, in the highest potential, allow us to tap into the highest possibility of the expression of the rest of the chart. I call these 9 core archetypes the 9 resiliency keys. One of those resiliency keys is courage. We need to be courageous in order to be resilient. And we have to know how to consciously and deliberately work with the energy of fear, especially in the complexity of the human story, because fear for us can be awe, fear for us can be existential and definitely not related to survival. And the whole story of fear is messy in the human condition. So that's what I've been unpacking for the last couple of weeks here on Facebook. And if you missed any of those, just scroll down, you'll find them below. We've been talking about the role of fear and courage, and we've been specifically looking at the spleen center and the evolutionary pressure that the spleen center is under and the gates of the spleen. So we finished that journey yesterday. Today I want to shift our focus a little bit to a different place in the chart. And it's a place where courage also lives, or the potential for courage also lives. It is part of the heart chakra. It is a center that in human design is relatively new. It's only been here since about the 1780s. The will center is a kind of a new center. It's the place where the ego lives. And of course, when I say the word ego, I always get a little bit nervous because we have such a negative definition of the word ego, right? We think of ego as sort of, I don't know, the shadow of self, right? It's the selfish self. It's the me, diva self. And that's not really the high expression of ego at all. Your ego is the individuated aspect of the divine that is you, your unique story. And if we look at the way that will center is defined, it's really designed for you to use your personal self to be of service to the world. Most of the channels connecting the will center are tribal. They have at their heart the theme of sharing, except for the 2551, which connects the will to the G, the higher self, right? And we see that the personal self is really born through initiation and connection to source. So our personal self, our ego, is really designed to serve our higher self in the bigger picture of who we are. And we get reawakened, sometimes in fun ways, sometimes in more challenging, disruptive ways. We get reawakened to our purpose by our connection to source or events that somehow connect us more deeply to source. The will center is also the place where our self-worth lives, our sense of value. Now today I want to talk about the gate 26 and courage. And I want to talk about the gate 26, and I talked about this a little bit a while ago in the context of anxiety. I want to talk about this in the context of courage too, because sometimes anxiety is anxiety, and I don't want to in any way downplay any of you who have real anxiety. We talk a lot about anxiety, and it's a term that we bat around kind of loosely without really being cognizant sometimes that this is a real thing. Anxiety is a real thing. I will tell you, as a person who, I had COVID in late February, early March. So it was one of the last year. So I was one of the very first wave of people who had COVID. And I'll tell you that since COVID, I have personally battled a lot of anxiety that I don't really have a sense of it being related to anything specific, but I do know just from work that I've done and different practitioners that I've seen that it's an autonomic nervous function. There are cycles for me personally when I get too tired or too run down or too stressed that kicks my brain into a fight or flight response. And it's gotten better, so I don't, you don't have to worry about me. I've definitely done some pretty hardcore functional medicine stuff to get through it and around it and to get it, to really work with it and manage it. But it's a real thing. And so please know that as I'm saying this, I'm not saying, oh, just get over your anxiety. It's just a courage thing. I'm not saying that. And I am saying, though, that sometimes there's an aspect of the anxiety or the fear that we experience in this 26 that is rooted in trauma. What we know is when we experience trauma, and there are really two kinds of trauma. And if you have not watched my TED Talk about this, if you go to TED.com and you search my name, Karen Curry Parker, I actually did a TEDx talk on this, and you can find my talk there. But when we look at trauma, there's really two kinds of trauma. There's macro trauma. That's the thing that the DSM defines as real trauma, right? It's sexual assault, violence, life-threatening events. And then there's what is sometimes called micro trauma. And micro trauma is a little bit more mysterious because we don't really understand sometimes what's the root of micro trauma. And I'm going to tell you what I think the root is. I think the root of micro trauma is any event, perception, or experience that causes you to lose connection with your sense of value and with your right place in the world. So when you get disconnected from the preciousness, the idea that you are a once-in-a-lifetime cosmic event, and because you lose connection to that preciousness that is you, you also start trying to be something that you're not, or someone that you're not, or somehow that you're not, and you craft this entire reality that's based on a false identity or a facade, and you lose connection with your right place in the world. Your inner knowingness, your intuition, and that intuition that connects the gate 26, the gate of integrity, to the gate 44, which we talked about yesterday, the gate of truth and the spleen, that integrity piece and that truth piece gets triggered. Our inner knowing, our wisdom, our knowledge, our innate connection to the true story of who we are, conscious or not, lets us know when we get off course, right? When we start to go down a path that really isn't aligned with our true self, there's something inside of us that knows it. We get this uneasy feeling, or we start to check out and we start to experience disconnect on many, many levels. We go watch Netflix when we could maybe be doing something else that might be pushing us towards a bigger, better, richer, fuller expression of who we are. We fail to show up for the things that we know we need to show up for that would catapult us into a more authentic expression of our lives because we're afraid, because we've internalized as micro trauma the idea that it's not safe to be who you are and how you are in the world. What happens is when we lose connection with that value piece and we drop into that traumatized expression of ourselves, we tend to cover it up by having what I call a breach of integrity, meaning we get out of integrity physically, we get out of integrity with our bodies, we get out of integrity with our resources, we misuse our resources, including money sometimes as an attempt to try to prove our value. We get out of integrity with our own identity. We start to hide out who we are. We start to cover it up so that no one can see it, no one can find it because we don't think it's safe for us to be who we really are. We sometimes get out of moral integrity because we don't think we're worthy of having access to energy or resources as our authentic selves. So we get sneaky and duplicitous sometimes about taking resources for ourselves because we think we can't get them naturally. Or we get out of energetic integrity. We fail to take care of ourselves, sustain ourselves, nurture ourselves, and then we make commitments that we can't really keep or that we have to drain our own energy source for in order to keep, and we get burned out. So this integrity energy, this integrity issue in this gate 26 actually impacts, if we look at this gate, it impacts the thymus, where we make B cells and T cells, the immune system, and our immune function. And so again, this is totally not scientific, so please don't take this and run with it other than to just contemplate and think about this for your own sake. When we're not living from our value, it compromises our immune response. It takes us away from a state of optimal physical well-being. And when we're in an environment where we're, at risk for immune assaults, like when we're in a pandemic, it makes us even that much more vulnerable. And you might be taking all the right vitamins and getting all the right sleep and doing everything, but if you're disconnected from your sense of value, that could still be impacting your physical health and wellness. And so for us to optimize our well-being on every level, that's not just physical well-being, your resource well-being, your identity well-being, your moral well-being, your energetic well-being, for us to really step into the creation of a energy of well-being, we have to also heal the karma or the conditioning of our self-worth. We have to heal those places where we've internalized that message that it's not okay for you to be who you are and how you are, because that's a lie. That's an abject lie. It's totally okay for you to be who you are and how you are. In fact, it's essential. In fact, I would argue it's the most important thing you have to do with your life, is for you to become the fullest expression of who you are in the way that's right for you. Because when you do that, you bring yourself into a higher state of alignment. You increase the level of well-being that you're holding. You become more sustainable, and those conditions are contagious. So not only are you creating it for yourself, you're actually creating a force field for that same energy that impacts everyone you encounter. When you walk down the street, you're carrying with you a wave of well-being that has the potential to impact others. Now, I'm not just making this up. There's actually science that backs this up. So did you know, for example, if you live in a happy neighborhood, especially if you live next to a happy neighbor, even if you never talk to that neighbor, you are 60% likelier to be happy because you live next door to somebody happy. Think about that. That's because higher frequencies of energies, people who are living in a state of well-being have a higher frequency of energy. Higher frequencies entrain lower frequencies. So you create an energy wave that begins to shift the world around you. And if we're all doing this work, think about the energy wave we're creating. Think about the possibility and the expansion we're pulling people into simply by virtue of our existence. So when we look at the gate 26 and the will center in particular, and we talk about this in the context of courage, we're really looking at a place where the human story, the archetype of the human story, is showing us that for us to really tap into deeper states of truth, deeper places of alignment, activating deeper states of value, and for us to measure value from a metric that's not so dense and material like numbers, but to measure our value from the quality of life that we're living and the quality of life that we're generating by virtue of our existence. When we start to look at it that way, we start to see that we can activate and tap into a whole different set of potentials when we heal this karma of self-worth. Now, why am I telling you this? Because next Wednesday and Thursday, Wednesday at 7 p.m. Central in the evening, Thursday at 11 a.m. Central during the day, Central Time Zone. And you can pick either one of these two sessions. It's the same sessions. I'm repeating it twice. I'm teaching a free webinar, Deconditioning by Design, because I want you to understand what's underneath the underneath of why perhaps you might be holding up a facade or not living true to the beautiful story that is you, the once in a lifetime cosmic event that you are. So if you haven't already signed up for this webinar, I'll post the link below. You can join us. We're going to be talking about how do you look at the narrative you're telling? How does that narrative impact you? How can you get underneath that narrative? And what do you need to do to start clearing it? I'm going to be answering questions like, does it really take 7 years to decondition? Nope. I'm going to talk about what is deconditioning so that you know where it comes from and maybe start exploring how perhaps it's kept you in a place that's smaller than the place you're supposed to be occupying. So that's all I got for you this week. Have a really great week and a great weekend. I will talk to you on Monday, and we'll continue our exploration of the resiliency key of courage. Until then, may you have the courage to fully defend and claim your right place in the world and to live from that once in a lifetime cosmic event place that is you. Have a great one. Bye-bye.